It's been a while since we covered the ongoing problems in Stormont in Northern Ireland for quite a while. And that is partly because, well, it's still a stalemate, unfortunately. Very, very so, unfortunately. And I will always maintain this position that what the DUP are doing is unfair to all the people in Northern Ireland. When you have a energy crisis, when you've got a cost of living crisis, all this other stuff that is going on in the country is affecting Northern Ireland as well. And the problem here is that the people in Northern Ireland could have a government which could be putting forward solutions, ideas, making people's lives in Northern Ireland better, except they refuse to go back into government because they don't like that there's the border in the Irish Sea, a border which they were told multiple times had to exist, because if not, what do you do about the Good Friday Agreement if you don't? And you've got to have a border somewhere. So the only place you can put it is down the Irish Sea. They threw their toys out of the pram. They pretty much were involved in the overthrowing of a UK government to try and get their way. And then they were in turn thrown under the bus by the very Brexiteers who they had then trusted and even helped to overthrow Theresa May. Needless to say, the situation that the DUP finds itself in is one entirely of their own making, and it is unfair for them to hold the political levers and potential solutions to help make people's lives better in Northern Ireland hostage because they don't like the way that they lost. I fail. I really do fail to see a better way than describing this current situation like that. That the DUP are acting like completely sore losers. So before we go getting into more of this, well, stalemate situation, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and an affiliation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much for watching, and thank you for the support you guys do show the channel. So, what's been going on over there? And more importantly, what kind of pressure are other people, and indeed our own government, trying to apply to the DUP to say, hey, you need to go back into Parliament? Because there have been discussions about this whole power sharing that currently operates in Northern Ireland. Is it, shall we say, fit for purpose anymore? There have been questions around that. Now, if we did ask those questions, we'd obviously have to get the go-ahead from Ireland and, of course, the US as well. But to be honest, as we have seen, both Ireland and the US and even the Irish lobby in America are super annoyed at the DUP for doing what they are doing. So if those questions were seriously asked, I think we would get a yes from both of those parties. But the big win, of course, was shockingly enough for Rishi Sunak, was the big Brexit climb down, the whole Windsor Framework. After noticing that, well, the Northern Ireland Protocol that Boris Johnson had brought in was completely full of holes and was, well, unworkable, Rishi Sunak actually did something a lot of us weren't generally expecting. We all thought that Rishi Sunak would continue this very, very much hardcore Brexiteer path, and he didn't. Instead, he actually compromised with the EU and presented the Windsor Framework, named once again to try and get the DUP on side. But of course, while this has solved not all the problems, of course, of the Northern Ireland Protocol, it has, shall we say, smoothed a lot of the transition and was more, shall we say, an attempted smoothing of the rough edges. However, there are still problems that do remain with the protocol. Like I say, it's not exactly perfect, but at least, shall we say, it was a start. And as I said back at the time in February, it signaled a very significant change in the government's policy of how it was going to treat and approach the problems that Brexit was causing the UK. And Sunak and even Kimmy Badenoch and most of the people in government, be they once supposedly staunch Brexiteers, are now compromising at every point with the EU, something which has massively upset the hard Brexiteers. But that's more about Brexit. But you get the idea of what I'm trying to get across. There has been this sense of really compromise on this point, which, once again, something the DUP don't really want. But the new pressure that they are putting on now was that there was meant to be this big trade conference over in Northern Ireland. It was going to be a big moment for Northern Ireland to say, hey, come and invest here. And it was certainly going to be sort of a big showcase, a very big showcase. And the fact that this was obviously going to be organized by Stormont, but of course, no Stormont, no people to organize it. There's still this trade conference going to happen. And now you've got sides in Northern Ireland. I think Alliance and Sinn Féin have said, so long as the DUP are not going to do this, don't hold this trade conference here, with even ambassadors from the US echoing those points as well. Not only that, but the Ulster Unionist Party, the Protestant opposition party, I suppose you would say, to the DUP, has come out and said what Donaldson is doing now is wrong, from withholding withholding the Stormont from opening, and him doing this almost seemingly indefinitely with no end in sight, giving these 7 hardpoint rules, which have been talked at length, fundamentally saying what you want is physically impossible because they want completely gone of the border in the Irish Sea. And said many times, unless the UK rejoins the customs union or the single market, where do you put the border? You can't put it between the Northern Republic of Ireland because, Good Friday Agreement, we've discussed that plenty of times on this channel. But this situation, once again, I think you could see coming to a head. Now, the big question, of course, comes if you do get another Stormont election, do the DUP lose enough votes to not be sort of the main Protestant party? Is it the Ulster Unionists who become the main party? And they've said they would go into Stormont. They've openly said, you doing this at this time, excellent. You've had your protest, you've made, the unionist cause, but now you're hurting the very communities you claim to protect by not being in Stormont, by not proposing solutions to, again, cost of living crisis, housing crisis, the energy crisis. You are, making people's lives worse. So there is now a clear division, I think, forming on the unionist side over Donaldson's tactics, but he has maintained this position time and time again that he is just going to be like this, and this is what it is going to be. So that's the update from Northern Ireland. Like I say, not much has really changed. There's more pressure, of course, being piled on the DUP. We'll see, of course, if a Stormont election probably gets called. Like I say, they were hoping at least the Windsor Framework would fix this. But as we said at the time, it's not going to fix anything in that regard. Yes, you fix sort of the main trade agreements that, the EU was even saying, hey, there are problems with the Northern Ireland Protocol, let's get together and fix them. And they sort of did with the Windsor Framework, though not all of them. But this is where we are. Once again, nothing has changed. The DUP still refuses to move, although there are some interesting fault lines forming around the Ulster Unionists. We'll see what happens there. And of course, all this, we'll see what happens if maybe this becomes a general election issue for Sunak. This is certainly something that Starmer should be highlighting, Rishi Sunak's failure to get Stormont open. It is a colossal failure on his part that he has failed to do this. And yet this is a big cause of Brexit. But hey, like I say, we've talked about this before. Yeah, Northern Ireland. We're talking about it again, but the update is nothing has changed, but more pressure is being applied, and there is now a split seemingly forming, certainly in unionist voters disagreeing with Donaldson's hard, firm stance on this. So we'll see how that develops. But like I say, not too much, to be honest, really has changed in that situation, which, to be honest, as I said at the beginning, is unfair, to be honest, to the voters of people in Northern Ireland who deserve representation in Stormont to be able to, get their problems solved. Because Stormont does have a lot of power that it could be using to be making their, constituents' lives easier. And of course, the DUP acting the way it is. But there you go. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.